History was made beneath the waters of the Persian Gulf today. An American submarine operating silently in the depths off the Iranian coast fired a torpedo that struck and sank an Iranian warship. This is the first confirmed torpedo kill by a United States Navy submarine since World War II. The last time an American submarine sank an enemy vessel with a torpedo was in 1945, 81 years ago, during the final months of the war against Japan. Since then, American submarines have tracked enemy ships, gathered intelligence, launched cruise missiles, and patrolled the oceans. But no submarine has fired a torpedo in combat and achieved a kill. Until today, March 4, 2026. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth confirmed the attack during a Pentagon briefing this afternoon, stating that a U.S. Navy submarine successfully engaged and destroyed an Iranian frigate that was operating in international waters near the Strait of Hormuz. Hegseth called it a historic moment and said the operation demonstrates American undersea dominance and the lethality of the United States Navy. The Iranian ship, identified as the IRIS Sahand, a Moudge-class frigate, was sunk with all hands. The Pentagon believes that approximately 150 Iranian sailors were aboard the vessel when it went down. None are believed to have survived. This is not just a military victory. This is a psychological blow to Iran. The Sahand was one of Iran's most advanced warships, equipped with anti-ship missiles, air defense systems, and radar. It was supposed to be capable of defending itself, but it never detected the American submarine. It never knew the torpedo was coming, and it sank in minutes. Iran's Navy, which has already lost 17 ships in this war, has now lost its ability to operate safely in its own waters. Because if a U.S. submarine can sink Iran's best frigate without warning, then no Iranian ship is safe. Let me walk you through exactly what happened today beneath the Persian Gulf, how this historic torpedo attack was carried out, why this is such a significant moment in naval warfare, what it means for Iran's ability to defend itself, and why this attack could change the entire dynamic of the war. The attack occurred at approximately 3:15 a.m. local time in the Persian Gulf, about 40 miles north of the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian frigate Sahand was conducting what Iran described as a defensive patrol in response to American and Israeli strikes on Iranian targets. The Sahand's mission was to provide air defense coverage for Iranian coastal facilities and to threaten any American or Allied ships that entered the area. But the Sahand never saw the threat coming. An American Virginia-class nuclear-powered attack submarine, whose name and hull number have not been disclosed for operational security reasons, had been tracking the Sahand for approximately 6 hours. Virginia-class submarines are among the most advanced undersea vessels in the world. They are equipped with state-of-the-art sonar systems that can detect ships from dozens of miles away, even in noisy, shallow waters like the Persian Gulf. They are virtually silent when operating at low speeds, making them nearly impossible for surface ships to detect. And they are armed with Mark 48 torpedoes, the most sophisticated and lethal anti-ship torpedoes ever built. According to Pentagon officials and sources familiar with the operation who spoke to CNN and the Wall Street Journal, the American submarine positioned itself approximately 8 miles from the Sahand, well within torpedo range, but far enough to remain undetected. The submarine's crew calculated the frigate's speed and course, input targeting data into the fire control system, and waited for authorization from CENTCOM to fire. The authorization came at 3:10 a.m. The submarine's captain ordered the firing of a single Mark 48 torpedo. The torpedo was launched from one of the submarine's torpedo tubes, accelerated to over 55 knots, which is approximately 63 miles per hour underwater, and used active sonar to home in on the Sahand's hull. The torpedo is designed to detonate not on impact, but beneath the ship's keel, creating a bubble of gas that breaks the ship's back and causes catastrophic structural failure. The Sahand's crew had less than 3 minutes from the moment the torpedo was fired to the moment of impact. And even if they had detected the incoming torpedo, which they apparently did not, there was nothing they could do. Modern warships have anti-missile defenses, anti-aircraft guns, and electronic warfare systems, but they have no defense against a torpedo traveling at high speed underwater. The Mark 48 hit the Sahand at 3:13 a.m. The explosion broke the ship in half. Survivors, if there were any in those first moments, would have had less than 2 minutes to abandon ship before the frigate went under. Iranian state media has not yet acknowledged the sinking, but Pentagon officials confirmed it. Satellite imagery shows debris and an oil slick at the location where the Sahand was operating. And Iranian naval communications intercepted by U.S. intelligence show Iranian forces searching for survivors and attempting to understand what happened. The Sahand is gone, and 150 Iranian sailors are dead. This is the single deadliest incident for the Iranian military since the war began 7 days ago. But the military impact is secondary to the strategic and psychological impact, because this attack fundamentally changes Iran's calculus about how to operate its navy. Iran's navy has always been the weakest branch of its military. Iran does not have aircraft carriers. It does not have modern destroyers or cruisers. What Iran has are small frigates, corvettes, fast attack boats, and submarines that are decades old and largely ineffective. Iran's naval strategy has always been based on asymmetric warfare, using large numbers of small boats to swarm and overwhelm larger ships, laying mines in shallow waters, and firing anti-ship missiles from shore. But over the past week, the United States and its allies have systematically destroyed Iran's navy. On March 2nd, 9 Iranian ships were sunk in a surface engagement with U.S. Navy destroyers and carrier-based aircraft. Since then, additional Iranian vessels have been hit by airstrikes. And now, an Iranian frigate has been sunk by a submarine that the Iranians never detected. Iran's navy has lost at least 17 ships. That is more than half of Iran's surface fleet. And the ships that remain are hiding in port, afraid to venture into open water because they know that American submarines are hunting them. This is the definition of sea control. The United States Navy now owns the Persian Gulf and the waters around Iran. Iranian ships cannot operate without being destroyed. Iranian submarines, if they try to leave port, will be tracked and sunk. And the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran tried to close just days ago, is now completely under American control. Iran has lost the ability to threaten shipping, to project power, or even to defend its own coastline. But let me explain why this specific attack, the Torpedo kill, is so historically significant. The last time a United States Navy submarine sank an enemy ship with a torpedo was in August 1945. The submarine was the USS Torsk, and it sank a Japanese coastal defense frigate just days before Japan surrendered. Since then, American submarines have been involved in countless operations. They tracked Soviet submarines during the Cold War. They gathered intelligence off the coasts of adversaries. They launched cruise missiles during the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and Syria. But they never fired a torpedo in anger. Why? Because modern naval warfare changed. Torpedoes became secondary weapons. The primary role of submarines shifted to intelligence gathering, deterrence with nuclear missiles, and launching cruise missiles from standoff distances. Surface ships were destroyed by aircraft or by other surface ships firing missiles. Submarines were too valuable and too expensive to risk in close-range torpedo attacks. But today, that changed. And it changed because the U.S. military has decided that this war requires the use of every available capability, including capabilities that have not been used in generations. The decision to authorize a torpedo attack was not made lightly. According to sources within the Pentagon, the submarine's captain requested permission to fire several hours before the attack. That request went up the chain of command to CENTCOM Commander General Michael Kurilla, and ultimately to Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, and possibly even President Trump. The decision to approve was based on several factors. First, the Sahand was a high-value target. It was one of Iran's most capable ships, and destroying it would significantly degrade Iran's naval capabilities. Second, the submarine had a clear shot with minimal risk of detection. Third, using a torpedo instead of a cruise missile sent a message. It demonstrated that American submarines could get close to Iranian ships, fire undetected, and kill with impunity. It was psychological warfare as much as it was military action. And it worked. Iranian naval commanders now know that their ships are vulnerable not just from the air and from surface ships, but from below. They cannot see American submarines. They cannot hear them. They cannot defend against them. And that knowledge will paralyze what remains of Iran's navy. But there is a darker side to this achievement. 150 Iranian sailors are dead. These were not Revolutionary Guard commanders. They were not senior officials. They were mostly young men, conscripts, and volunteers who were serving in their nation's navy. They were doing their jobs, and they died instantly when the torpedo broke their ship in half. There was no warning, No chance to surrender, no opportunity to abandon ship, just a sudden catastrophic explosion, and then the sea rushing in. Some will argue that this is war and that such deaths are inevitable, and they are correct. War is brutal. But others will point to this attack as evidence that the United States is conducting a war of annihilation, not a war of deterrence. Sinking a ship with all hands, killing 150 sailors who posed minimal threat to American forces, will be used by Iran and by critics of the war as proof that Trump is escalating unnecessarily and causing needless deaths. So this attack will be celebrated by some and condemned by others. But regardless of how it is judged morally or politically, it is undeniably historic. And it is a turning point in the war, because it confirms what many have suspected, but few wanted to say out loud. The United States is not fighting a limited war to destroy Iran's nuclear program or to deter Iranian aggression. The United States is fighting a total war to eliminate Iran's military, cripple its economy, and force regime change. The submarine attack is part of that total war. It is part of a campaign that has killed over 1,000 Iranians in the past week, destroyed 17 ships, eliminated Iran's air force, and targeted Iran's leadership. And according to Secretary Hegseth, this is just the beginning. Hegseth said during today's briefing, "We are just getting started. The pace of operations is accelerating, not decelerating. We are going deeper into Iranian territory, hitting more targets, and we will continue until Iran's ability to threaten the United States and our allies is completely eliminated." Just getting started. Think about what that means. We are 7 days into this war. 17 ships have been sunk. Over 1,000 Iranians are dead. The Iranian Navy is destroyed. The Air Force is grounded. And Hegseth says we are just getting started. What comes next? Based on statements from Hegseth, from Trump, from Secretary of State Rubio, and from military analysts, the next phase of the war will involve strikes deeper into Iran, targeting infrastructure and government facilities that have been off limits until now. This includes Iran's power grid. The U.S. will destroy electrical substations and power plants, plunging Iran into darkness. Without electricity, hospitals cannot function. Water treatment plants shut down, and communication networks fail. This will cause a humanitarian crisis, but will also cripple the Iranian government's ability to coordinate and respond. This includes Iran's oil infrastructure, refineries, pipelines, export terminals. The U.S. will eliminate Iran's ability to produce and sell oil, destroying the regime's primary source of revenue. This includes transportation infrastructure, bridges, highways, railroads, airports. The U.S. will isolate Iranian cities from each other, making it impossible to move troops or supplies. This includes command and control facilities, government buildings, military headquarters, communication towers. The U.S. will systematically dismantle the regime's ability to govern, and this potentially includes leadership targets. If the Assembly of Experts chooses a new supreme leader, that person will be targeted just as Khamenei was. The goal is not just to degrade Iran's military. The goal is to make it impossible for the Iranian government to function. And eventually, Trump hopes the regime will collapse from within, and the Iranian people will rise up and install a government that is friendly to the United States. That is the end game. That is what just getting started means. And the submarine attack is a symbol of that strategy. The United States demonstrated today that it can strike anywhere at any time with any weapon, and Iran cannot stop it. American submarines can hunt Iranian ships in Iranian waters and sink them with impunity. American bombers can strike deep into Iran without being intercepted. American missiles can hit any target in the country. And Iran can do nothing but absorb the punishment and hope that somehow the regime survives. But there is a complication, a big one: Hezbollah. Reports today confirm that Israel has begun military operations in southern Lebanon against Hezbollah positions. Israeli ground forces crossed the border, and Israeli aircraft are bombing Hezbollah facilities in Beirut and southern Lebanon. This is the two-front war that everyone feared. Israel is fighting Iran in Iran, and now Israel is fighting Hezbollah in Lebanon. And if Hezbollah retaliates by launching its 150,000 rockets at Israeli cities, this war will explode into a regional catastrophe. But we will cover that in another video. For now, the story is the submarine, the Torpedo, the Sahand at the bottom of the Persian Gulf, and the 150 Iranian sailors who will never come home. History was made today. The first torpedo kill since World War II. The first time in 81 years that an American submarine has sunk an enemy ship in combat. It is a moment that will be studied in naval academies for decades. It is a moment that demonstrates the lethality and technological superiority of the United States Navy. And it is a moment that confirms what the past week has shown. Iran is losing this war. Badly. The submarine attack is not the end. It is, as Secretary Hegseth said, just the beginning. But it is a beginning that Iran will not forget. And it is a beginning that changes everything. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this war is accelerating. The strikes are deepening, the death toll is rising, and the next phase could be even more devastating than what we have seen so far. The Sahand is gone, and Iran's navy is finished. History was made today, and the war is far from over.